Welcome to the Academic Writing Primer. The purpose of this primer is to provide you with the practical and conceptual tools you need to develop your academic writing skills, and to show you how academic writing differs from other styles of writing. The primer is divided into two sections, lower order concerns and higher order concerns. In academic writing, not every element has equal priority. The most important parts of your writing are called higher order concerns, or HOCs, which are the broad elements such as documentation of your sources, thesis, organization, and development. After you have addressed these important elements, you can turn your attention to lower order concerns, or LOCs, such as grammar, usage, and mechanics. You may be tempted to ignore LOCs, not realizing how they affect HOCs. Remember, others may not view you as a credible student or leader if your writing is riddled with punctuation and spelling errors. As you become a more experienced writer, it will be important for you to take the time to address both orders of concern. In this presentation, we'll focus on Section 2, Higher Order Concerns, which includes things like documenting your sources, thesis, focus, audience, purpose, organization, and development. Throughout your academic program, you will be engaging in critical thinking. The National Council for Excellence in Critical Thinking defines it as being able to conceptualize, apply, analyze, synthesize, and/or evaluate information. And from a Christian perspective, critical thinking also includes forming a solid judgment that reconciles scientific evidence and common sense with biblical principles. Throughout your academic program, you'll also be expected to model academic honesty or integrity. The best way to avoid problems is to develop good academic and time management skills so that you'll not be tempted by dishonest shortcuts. Please don't underestimate the amount of time it takes to produce honest work. In your primer, I have provided a summary of the 4 basic steps all Bethel students should take, and more information is available on the Bethel University website. First, understand Bethel's policy on academic honesty. Bethel is a Christian academic community, and its fundamental purpose is the pursuit of knowledge and the development of growing Christian persons. Essential to the success of this educational mission is a commitment to principles of ethical academic integrity. Every member of the university community is responsible for upholding the highest standards of honesty at all times. Students, as members of this community, are also responsible for adhering to the principles and spirit of academic honesty. Violation of our standards can result in denial of credit in a course, as well as even dismissal from the university. Penalties are given at the discretion of the faculty member, and offenders may be referred to the Dean of Academic Programs. Students charged with a violation have the right to appeal any disciplinary action. You should contact the Office of Academic Affairs for details on the appeal process. Second, make sure you know how exactly to produce honest academic work. You're being dishonest and plagiarizing anytime you claim or imply that work someone else did is really your own, whether you intended to or not, and anytime you get in the way of another student's research or studying. You are also being dishonest anytime you claim that your work is new and original, and it is not. Plagiarism includes all of the following: quoting words, sentences, paragraphs, or pages from another writer's work without giving that writer credit. Copying another writer's sequence of ideas without giving that writer credit. Changing just a few words in a direct quote. Misrepresenting or distorting the author's work. And even buying, borrowing, or reusing a paper. Third, talk to your instructor if you're unsure whether a particular project or action is appropriate. Your instructors know that it can be difficult to judge whether material is common knowledge or whether a particular assignment needs merely informal documentation. They will be glad to help. And I always say, when in doubt, document. And finally, discourage others from violating standards of academic integrity. Bethel would like its students to help create a climate in which academic integrity is taken seriously. One of the key issues behind academic integrity is loyalty. If you see a fellow student cheating, are you more loyal to the principles of right and wrong or to your classmate? Both the university and the faculty are committed to protecting the rights, including the grade curve, of honest students, but they would like to help a student with a cheating problem rather than expel him or her. In this primer, I focus on the APA 6th edition method of citing or documenting sources. It was developed by the American Psychological Association. There are many different kinds of styles. Maybe you've heard of MLA and many others like AP or Chicago style, Turabian. But in the field of education, we focus on APA 6th edition is what we're going to use. So why do you need to use APA or a documentation style? Well, when you're doing academic research, you must give credit to the information sources you used, whether you directly quoted or paraphrased the author. APA citation provides the reader of your paper or project with the information needed to locate any of the sources that you cited. And this will come in handy when you start your own research and you find a seminal study and you go to the back of it and there are pages and pages of sources. You'll really appreciate that standardized manner for citing your sources. It makes it much easier for you to decipher and to find them for yourself. Please remember that there's a difference between a reference list and a bibliography. The reference list is a list of all the sources used in your paper. It appears in a specific format at the end of the paper, and it should not be confused with a bibliography. A reference list includes the sources that you cited or referred to in the text. A bibliography, on the other hand, lists all of the sources that you consulted in preparing your paper, whether or not the work is cited in the text. Let's take a look at some of the basic rules for reference lists. At the top of the page, you should center the word references. Please don't use like works cited or sources or anything else. In APA, the word we use is references. Double space your entire list. All lines after the first line of each entry should be indented 1/2 inch from the left margin. So in other words, it's the opposite of paragraph formatting. Only one space is placed between the elements. Reference list entries are alphabetized by the last name of the first author of each work, or if no author is present, by the title. Volume numbers are italicized, but not issue numbers. Edition information is included only for revised second and subsequent editions. In other words, you wouldn't put first edition behind any of your entries. If the date a web page was created is not given, then use N period D period. No date, so that the reader knows that you just didn't forget to include the date that it was published or created. A period is placed at the end of all citations except those ending in a URL or DOI. In the primer, I've provided some examples of some of the most popular references that you would be using in your paper. I've included an example of a book, a chapter in an edited book, a journal article with a DOI, and a journal article without a DOI. Let's say you are citing something that was published by a corporation or a government report or a website. I give you an example of what that looks like. A court case, also abstracts and electronic books. Electronic books are becoming more and more popular, so I've included an example of how to cite those as well. In your primer, I've also included APA levels of headings. Most of you will be using levels 1 and 2, maybe levels 3, but for longer papers, you might need to use all 5 levels of headings according to APA. So just take note of the different formatting rules depending on which level of headings that you're going to be using in your paper. Some of your professors might ask you to do an assignment called an annotated bibliography. So in case that happens, I did include an example of what to include in an annotation and what a bibliography that's annotated looks like. So you can consult your primer for that example. But basically, when you annotate, you're summarizing, assessing, and reflecting on the source so that when you come back to that later, to that list, you can remind yourself what it was about. I've also included information in your primer about thesis statements. We have 3 different kinds: analytical, expository, and argumentative. So please think about what is the purpose of the paper that you've been asked to write and include the correct style of thesis statement. The thesis statement should be the last sentence of the first paragraph of your paper. Analytical thesis statements are used when your paper breaks down an issue or idea into component parts and evaluates that issue or idea. An expository thesis statement is for a paper that explains something to your audience. An argumentative thesis statement makes a claim about a topic and then justifies that claim with specific evidence. It will be important for you to follow academic paragraph structure in your papers. An academic paragraph has at least 5 sentences in it. The first sentence is your topic sentence. It introduces the main idea of the paragraph. The next 3 or 4 sentences provide details to develop and support that main idea, and it includes things like supporting facts or details, anecdotes, examples, statistics, that sort of thing. Then the last sentence of the paragraph should be the restating of the main idea. It can be the closing sentence of that main idea, or it can introduce the next paragraph. Think of it as a nice, complete sandwich. You'll be successful in turning in a quality piece of academic writing if you've spent time in all 3 of the stages: the pre-writing stage, the drafting stage, and the revising stage. If you don't leave yourself enough time, for example, to revise, to read for higher order concerns and make changes, or to read for lower order concerns and make changes, you're going to turn in a paper that could have been much, much better. Or if you skip the pre-writing stage where you don't take the time to organize your ideas and to answer the question, the research question that you've been given, or the prompt that your professor has given you, or you haven't included a solid thesis statement that introduces the reader to what the paper's about, you're also not going to be turning in a quality paper. So spend time in the pre-writing, drafting, and revising stage. When you write an academic paper and you've conducted some research, you're going to be incorporating work from other writers. Let's talk about the difference between quotation, summary, paraphrase, and synthesis. A quotation contains exact words from a source passage presented in quotation marks. A summary is a brief and objective account, in your own words, of the main ideas in a source passage. Paraphrase is a restatement, in your own words, of a passage of text. Its structure reflects the structure of the source passage. Synthesis is the integration of quoted, summarized, and/or paraphrased source material with your own ideas to create something new. In your primer, I've included 2 try-it boxes, one for paraphrasing and one for synthesizing. So go ahead and try your hand at that. An example of how you might paraphrase that paragraph and how you might synthesize some work is provided in your primer, and I've given you some potential answers in the back of the primer. The next section of your primer is about website critiquing. When you are deciding whether you should include a website or a web page as a credible scholarly source, you'll want to use these 5 criteria to determine whether you should use it or not. Look at accuracy, authority, objectivity, currency, and coverage. These elements will help you to determine whether you should use it as one of your sources or not. Sometimes students will sit down to write their academic paper and they realize they have what we call writer's block. Often the reason for writer's block is that we're trying to use both sides of our brain simultaneously. So in your primer, I've provided a step-by-step example of what you can do. Start with step 1 is to use the creative side of your brain by choosing your topic. And then go to step 2 where you're critically refining your topic. Back to step 3 on the creative side, collect some ideas. Step 4, organize those ideas. Step 5, put those ideas on paper. And step 6, revise your rough draft. So if you follow those steps, I think you'll find that it will help you break through writer's block if that's what you're experiencing. Other things you can try are walking away, writing about something else. You can read something else, ask yourself some questions and then answer them. You can write at an unusual time. You can exercise first, ask for help, break it down, begin in the middle. This was revolutionary for me. I'm such a concrete sequential person that I thought I always had to start at the beginning of my paper. In fact, it served me well to realize, wow, I can start in the middle, and then I can go back and write the introduction, introduce what I have just written, and then write the conclusion, draw some conclusions from what I've written. You can talk out the paper. If you have someone you can talk to about what you've read, and then it helps you kind of flesh out what your thoughts are and what you want to put on paper. You can tape record your paper. You can change the audience, or you can play a role. So these are some ideas that you can try when you're experiencing writer's block. This presentation has been about the most important parts of your writing called higher order concerns, or HOCs. They included the broad elements such as documentation of your sources, thesis, organization, and development. After you have addressed these important elements, you can turn your attention to the lower order concerns like grammar and usage and mechanics. You may want to use the last page of your primer as a checklist. Address each of these criteria and you will have written an excellent academic paper. Remember to take the time to address both orders of concern so that others will view you as the credible leader that you are.